My boss fired me on a Tuesday and thought I'd forgotten the password to the entire company's operating system by Wednesday. Vincent Rodriguez had been running TechCore Industries for 15 years, and I'd been his head of IT operations for 12 of those years. But apparently, blood runs thicker than expertise. His 24-year-old nephew Dylan graduated with a computer science degree, and suddenly Vincent decided the company needed fresh blood and modern perspectives. What Vincent didn't realize was that I had built their entire digital infrastructure from scratch, using a custom framework that existed nowhere else in the world, and I was the only person alive who truly understood how it worked. The day Vincent called me into his office, I already knew what was coming. Dylan had been shadowing me for 3 weeks, asking surface-level questions and taking notes on a tablet like he was preparing for something. "Tom, we're going in a different direction," Vincent said, not meeting my eyes. "Dylan's going to take over IT operations. He's got new ideas about cloud integration and artificial intelligence." I nodded calmly and asked about my severance package. Vincent seemed surprised by how easily I was taking it. He handed me a check for 2 weeks' pay and said my access would be terminated by 5 p.m. I cleaned out my desk, shook hands with my colleagues, and walked out the door. But I didn't drive home. Instead, I sat in my car across the street and waited. Dylan lasted exactly 4 days before the first major error occurred. I watched through the company's external monitoring dashboard as their primary server cluster began throwing critical warnings. The system I'd designed had multiple fail-safes, but they were all tied to a central authentication protocol that required manual intervention every 72 hours. It was my insurance policy, something I'd built in after years of watching companies treat their IT staff like disposable equipment. Dylan would be staring at error messages right now, probably Googling solutions and finding nothing. Because the system wasn't based on any standard framework. It was entirely my creation, documented only in my head and a few encrypted files he'd never be able to access. By day 6, their entire customer database was locked. I knew this because my former colleague Janet texted me in a panic. "Tom, everything's down. Dylan says he can't access the main directories. Vincent's losing his mind." "What happened?" I texted back that I was sorry to hear about their troubles and suggested they contact a professional IT consultant. What I didn't tell Janet was that I'd been monitoring their network traffic from my home computer. Every failed login attempt, every desperate workaround Dylan tried, every increasingly frantic email Vincent sent to potential replacement contractors. None of them could help because none of them understood the architecture I'd spent years perfecting. The breaking point came on Friday morning. Vincent's biggest client, Meridian Financial, was scheduled to receive their quarterly data analysis report. It was a contract worth $2 million annually, and the report was generated automatically by my custom system every 3 months. Except now the system was completely inaccessible, and Dylan had somehow made things worse by attempting to override the security protocols. I received a call at 8:47 a.m. from Vincent himself. His voice was strained, almost pleading. "Tom, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but we need your help. Just for a few hours. Name your price." I let the silence stretch for a long moment before responding. "I'm sorry, Vincent. I'm no longer employed by TechCore Industries." What Vincent didn't know was that Dylan had been calling me directly for the past 3 days. The first call came Tuesday night at 11 p.m. Dylan's voice was shaky, clearly stressed. "Tom, this is Dylan from TechCore. I'm having some trouble with the server configuration. Could you maybe walk me through the authentication process?" I listened patiently as he described symptoms that told me he'd made the situation significantly worse. "Dylan," I said calmly, "you're Vincent's nephew. I'm sure he has confidence in your abilities to figure this out." The second call came Wednesday at 6 a.m. The third call came Thursday during my lunch break. Each time, Dylan sounded more desperate. Each time, I politely declined to help. By Monday of the second week, TechCore Industries was hemorrhaging money. Their automated billing system was down, their inventory management was frozen, and their customer service department couldn't access any client information. I drove past the office and saw Vincent's car in the parking lot at 2 a.m. The lights were on in the IT department, which meant Dylan was probably still there, frantically trying to undo whatever damage he'd caused. My phone buzzed with another text from Janet. Tom, they're talking about bankruptcy. Meridian Financial is threatening to sue. Can't you help? I turned off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, I received an unexpected visitor. Vincent's wife Elena knocked on my door at 7 a.m., still in her work clothes from her overnight shift at the hospital. Tom, I know this isn't my place, but Vincent is having panic attacks. He hasn't slept in 5 days. The company is his entire life. I invited her in for coffee and listened as she explained that Dylan had admitted he was in over his head. But Vincent was too proud to admit the mistake. He's going to lose everything, Elena said, tears in her eyes. The house, the kids' college funds, everything is tied up in that company. I thanked her for coming and said I'd think about it. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in 2 weeks. I got dressed in professional clothes and drove to TechCore Industries. The receptionist looked shocked to see me. Tom, oh, thank goodness, are you here to fix everything? I asked to speak with Vincent privately. His office looked like a disaster zone. Empty coffee cups, crumpled papers, and his computer screen showing the same error message that had been haunting them for days. Vincent looked up when I entered, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Tom, I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I should never have let you go. I sat down across from his desk and folded my hands. Vincent, I didn't come here to gloat or to hear apologies. I came here to make you an offer, I continued. Vincent leaned forward, hope flickering in his expression. I'll fix your system. I'll restore all your data, get Meridian Financial their report, and make sure everything runs smoothly again. Vincent's face lit up with relief. Thank you, Tom. Whatever you want, salary, equity, anything. I held up my hand to stop him. I'm not finished. In exchange, I want Dylan's position permanently. Not just IT operations, I want to be Chief Technology Officer with complete authority over all technical decisions. I want a 5-year contract that you cannot terminate without cause. And I want equity in the company, 20%. Vincent's mouth fell open. 20%? Tom, that's what 12 years of loyalty and expertise is worth. I said firmly. That's what having the only person who can save your company is worth. And Vincent, let's be clear about something. If you say no, I walk out that door and you'll never see me again. Dylan can figure it out himself, or you can find another IT consultant who might be able to rebuild your entire system from scratch in 6 to 8 months. Your choice. Vincent stared at me for a long moment, calculating. I could see him weighing his pride against his desperation, his family's financial security against his ego. Finally, he reached for his phone. I need to call my lawyer, he said quietly. While Vincent worked on the legal paperwork, I walked into the IT department where Dylan was hunched over a computer, surrounded by energy drink cans and technical manuals. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, and I could see the mixture of relief and shame in his eyes. Tom, I'm so sorry. I thought I could handle it, but this system is like nothing I learned in school. I sat down at the terminal next to him and began typing commands. Dylan, you're not stupid. This system is complex because it needed to be. But you made a critical error in judgment. Dylan nodded, waiting for me to continue. You assumed that because you had a degree, you automatically knew more than someone with experience. It took me exactly 47 minutes to restore full system functionality. I entered my master authentication codes, bypassed the security protocols that had been locking everyone out, and initiated the data recovery sequence I'd built for exactly this scenario. Dylan watched in amazement as screens full of error messages transformed into normal operational dashboards. How did you do that so fast? He asked. I turned to face him. Because I built this system, Dylan. Every line of code, every security measure, every backup protocol. This isn't some off-the-shelf software you can Google your way through. This is 12 years of my knowledge and experience made digital. Dylan looked genuinely humbled. What happens to me now? That depends on you, I said, pulling up the Meridian Financial report that had been stuck in processing for over a week. With a few keystrokes, I initiated the automated generation sequence. You can either learn from this experience and become a valuable member of the team, or you can let your ego convince you that this was just bad luck. Dylan nodded thoughtfully. I want to learn. I realize now that I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. I smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. Good. Because I'm going to be your boss now, and I have very high standards. The Meridian financial report completed processing and was automatically sent to their secure portal, exactly 14 days late, but fully accurate. Vincent found us in the IT department an hour later, looking more relieved than I'd ever seen him. Tom, the lawyers have drafted the contract. 20% equity, 5-year term, full authority over technical operations. He handed me a thick folder of documents. I also want to apologize publicly to the entire staff. What I did was wrong, and everyone should know that. I shook his hand and accepted the folder. Vincent, I don't need a public apology. What I need is for this to never happen again. When I make technical recommendations, they get implemented. When I say we need new equipment or staff, it gets approved. And when someone threatens the stability of our systems, they answer to me. The next few months were transformative for TechCore Industries. With my new authority as CTO, I implemented security protocols that prevented any single person from causing system-wide failures. I hired 2 additional IT specialists and created comprehensive documentation for all our systems. Dylan, to his credit, threw himself into learning with genuine humility. He worked late, asked intelligent questions, and slowly began to understand the complexity of what we'd built. Vincent, meanwhile, seemed to have learned his lesson about the difference between formal education and practical expertise. He consulted me on every major business decision that had technical implications. 6 months after my reinstatement, Meridian Financial offered us an exclusive 3-year extension worth $8 million. They specifically cited the reliability and sophistication of our data analysis systems as the reason for their confidence in our company. Vincent called a company-wide meeting to announce the contract and made sure to credit the IT department's leadership for the achievement. Dylan had grown into a competent junior developer, and he publicly thanked me for teaching him the difference between knowing theory and understanding practice. The other employees who had watched the drama unfold seemed to understand that expertise and loyalty were not qualities to be discarded lightly. But the real satisfaction came from an unexpected source. Vincent's wife Elena invited my family to their house for dinner, and during the evening, Vincent pulled me aside privately. Tom, I need to tell you something. That week, when everything was falling apart, I realized something important. I'd been running this company for 15 years, but I never really understood what made it work. I thought success was about having the newest ideas and the youngest employees. I was wrong. He looked genuinely reflective. You didn't just build our computer systems. You built the foundation that everything else stands on. I'm sorry it took nearly losing everything for me to realize that. As my equity stake began generating quarterly distributions, I found myself in a position I'd never expected. Financially secure and professionally respected. The 20% ownership meant I had a real voice in company strategy, and Vincent consistently sought my input on major decisions. Dylan had evolved from a threat to my job security into a capable teammate who understood that competence comes from experience, not just education. Other employees began approaching me with career advice, recognizing that longevity and expertise were valuable commodities in a rapidly changing industry. TechCore Industries was more stable and profitable than it had ever been. A year after the crisis, I received a job offer from one of our competitors. The salary was 30% higher than my current compensation, and they offered immediate hiring for a senior management position. I scheduled a meeting with Vincent to discuss the offer, partly out of professional courtesy and partly to gauge his reaction. When I showed him the offer letter, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Tom, a year ago, I would have panicked. I would have assumed you were trying to leverage me for more money or better benefits. He leaned back in his chair. But now I know something I didn't know then. You're not the kind of person who abandons ship when things get difficult. You're right, I told Vincent. I'm not going anywhere, but I wanted you to see this offer because it represents something important. Other companies recognize the value of what we've built here. They're willing to pay premium prices for the kind of stability and expertise that you almost threw away. Vincent nodded thoughtfully. What do you need from me to make sure you stay? I had already thought about this question. I want to expand our IT department into a full technology division. I want to hire 5 more developers and start offering our system as a service to other companies. And I want Dylan to lead the customer support team once he's ready. Vincent grinned. Done. When do we start? 2 years after my reinstatement, TechCore Industries had grown from a single location operation into a regional technology services company. Our proprietary system was now licensed to 12 other businesses, generating recurring revenue that had tripled our annual profits. Dylan had indeed become the head of customer support and was pursuing his master's degree part-time with company assistance. Vincent had been featured in a business magazine article about the importance of recognizing and retaining institutional knowledge. In the article, he specifically mentioned the lesson he'd learned about not confusing formal credentials with practical competence. The irony wasn't lost on me that the system I'd designed as a protection against being discarded had ultimately become the foundation for my greatest professional success. The authentication protocols and security measures that had locked Dylan out during the crisis were now the competitive advantages that set us apart from other technology companies. Clients specifically chose us because of the reliability and sophistication of systems that existed nowhere else. What had begun as a defensive measure had evolved into our primary market differentiator. Vincent often joked that firing me was the best business decision he'd ever made because it forced him to recognize what he'd been taking for granted. Looking back, I realized that the 2 weeks I'd spent watching Vincent's company struggle had taught me something valuable about power and patience. I could have rescued them immediately and returned to my old position with perhaps a small raise and an apology. Instead, I'd waited, watched, and used their desperation to negotiate a position that reflected my actual value to the organization. Dylan had learned that expertise can't be downloaded or inherited. Vincent had learned that loyalty and competence are not renewable resources that can be casually discarded. And I had learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people experience the full consequences of their decisions. Today, TechCore Industries employs 47 people across 3 locations, and my equity stake has made me financially independent. Dylan runs our customer support division with competence and humility, and he's become one of my most trusted colleagues. Vincent consults me on every major business decision, and he's never again made the mistake of assuming that newer is automatically better. But the most satisfying part isn't the money or the recognition. It's knowing that I transformed a moment of professional betrayal into a lesson that benefited everyone involved. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth isn't to argue or plead. Sometimes it's simply to step back and let the absence of your expertise speak louder than any words could.